Catch 'em all.
Hi guys, today we'll be going over the SQL variables. If you like this tutorial, please give it a like and leave all your questions in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification button to be notified whenever I post a new video. Let's start then. Hi guys and welcome to today's tutorial. Today we'll be learning about variables, declaring a variable, setting a variable value. Alrighty, so what is a variable? A variable is literally an object that holds a single value of a certain type, example, integer, date, variant character string, etc. And a variable always starts with the add sign. So you always use the add sign prior to the variable that you will be using. Let's go over some examples here so I can show you how we'll be using the variables. So the first thing we will do, we will declare our variable. And as I said earlier, the variable name should always have a prefix of the add sign. Let's call this one test. And we will declare it as a var char or variant character string of, for example, 100 characters, and let's give it a value of I am hungry. Now let's print the value of this variable. Now if I execute this script, the results that we will be seeing here should be I am hungry, or the message I am hungry. Let's do that. Alright, so as I said, that's our result of the value that we assigned to our variable here, and the variable is called @test. Now let's say instead of print, let me do select instead. So select my variable as my message. I will call the column as my message. Let's run it again. Okay, so this is my column that I will select in here, and I alias it as my message. The main column actually is a variable, which is called @test. Now let's do or set a variable value in a different way. So we saw the first version of it. Let's start typing version number 2 of this. So we'll do again declare @test, let's call it test2, as varchar 100. Now here is another way how to feed a value to it, and the way we do it, you will write set and you type in the name of the variable and you do the equal sign and you give it the value that you want to feed to that variable, and you return your variable test2 as my message, let's call it 2. Now let me run this. Okay, so it did give me the same exact result. And I have message misspelled. Alright, just corrected it. Alright, so pretty much this will actually tell you and show you that the variable is actually an object where you save or temporarily save a value within a certain data type. The reason why I say it's temporarily saved, because once I close this window, and if I reopen it again, we will need to declare that variable again in order for the script to run. You can't just come here and run it without declaring it. And as you can see, it will tell you that this variable must be declared. And a value needs to be assigned or set to that variable. So that's why you always have to run any query that has a variable with its declare and set statements. If you don't run it with those two statements here, your query will fail and will tell you that I don't know what you're talking about, I don't know what that variable is. You better declare it and assign a value to it. Alright, so we saw the two ways that you can declare a variable and assign a value to it. The first one is assigning the value right away or right after you declare the value and you just call it in your select statement. The second way is, or version, is declaring your variable, give it a type or assign a type to it, then assign a value to it by using the set command here, and call your variable on a select statement. And if I run both of these, you will see that they both return the same exact result. Now, let's go over some different examples here, just so you guys get the hang of using or how to use the variables in SQL Server. Alright, so let's declare a new variable. Let's call it @num for number, and this will be an integer, and we just type int for short. Let's set our variable value to number 2. Then let's call or select our variable here and alias the column as the word number. As you can see, it did return the exact value that we gave it or we set it under. Now, if I switch this to number 3, it will change my results to number 3. Now, let's set it back to number 2 and run it. Now, what I will do is I will need to add, or I will add actually some additional columns here to be returned. And I will say my first column will be the value of my variable num. My second column should have the value of my variable num plus the number 2. And I will alias it as num plus num, so which is my variable number plus whatever number I choose. Now let's run this. So as you can see, my num variable has a value of 2 and it was called over here in this section, and it did return the value number 2. The second column has my @num variable value, which is number 2, plus a number 2. And when we called it within our SQL select statement, it did actually take this value and it added the number 2 to it, and it returned number 4. Now let's change this to number 6, for example, and run my query. If I do this, it will take again for this value here, it will take the value that I set for my add num variable, which is number 2, and it will add the number 6 to it. So 2 plus 6, we get 8 over here. Okay, so let's see another way again of using the variables. Let's declare num1 as int, and let's declare another variable, a second variable, num2 as int as well. Now let's set our num1 variable to number 2, and let's set our variable number 2 or num2 to the number 3. Okay, now let's call our variables here. So I'm going to call my add num1, and I will call my add num2 as well. Now if I run this, I should get two columns, first column num1 and the second column num2. The first column should have this value over here, number 2. The second column should have this value here, number 3. Let's see how this will work by executing this statement. As you can see, we've got number 2 under num1 and number 3 under num2, which is exactly what we set those two variables for. Now let's say I want to add an additional column where we will be adding the value of variable number 1 plus variable number 2. The way we do that is we can say add num1 plus add num2, and we alias it as total. Let's run this so you can see it down here in the result set. Alright, so we have number 2 that's actually giving us the value of the variable add num1. Then we have column number 2 that's getting the value of the variable add num2. Then we have a total here of adding the values of add num1 plus add num2. So 2 plus 3, it will give us a total of 5, which is exactly what our query did return. Now let's see how we can use multiple variables within a query and against a certain table. So let's say I want to query this table using, for example, the order quantity. That's greater than or equal to certain value, and where the start date is greater than or equal to another value here. So 2013 January the 1st, and where the product ID Let's call it here. And let's say, and the product ID, let's say it's equal to number 3. So let's run this query. And as you can see, it will run the first filter, which is the order quantity greater than 50. So pretty much every single value here should be greater than 50. You should not see anything less than or equal to 50. Everything should be greater than 50. Why? Because we literally specified it in our query. And the second filter here within our where clause is actually the date. So every single row should be greater than or equal to January 1st of 2013. You will not see anything, any order that was placed prior to that date. And the last filter within our where clause is the product ID equal to 3. So pretty much every value here should be equal to 3. As you can see. Now, let me show you how we can use all these filters as a form of variables. First thing we will do, we will declare our variables. First thing will be quantity as integer. The second one, let's call it start date or sDate. And we'll give it date format or type. And the last variable, let's call it prod ID, and we will give it an int or integer data type, because the value will be actually in a whole number for those int variables, and the value will be in a date format for the sDate or start date variable, because we assigned a date data type to it. Now let's set the values here. I will give them the same exact values that we used in our where clause. And I will change those values that I have in the where clause with the name of each corresponding variable that I used up here within my query. So the way we read this is we declare our variables and assign data types to them. Then we set each variable to specific value or single value, as we defined within the definition of the variables earlier within this tutorial. And we run our query using a where clause where we will apply or implement those variables that we declared up here. We will use them at the bottom of our SQL statement or within our where clause. Now let's run this. And as you can see, we will get the same results. We will get everything in the result set here and their product ID as 3. Why? Is because we did set number 3 for the product ID. And that's what we used in the product ID equal to whatever value the variable @product ID has, which is 3. The same thing here for the start date. We used the @sDate variable. So pretty much we are saying here that give me all orders where the start date is greater than or equal to whichever value we assigned to the @sDate variable, which is January 1st of 2013. That's why on the values here, when I scroll down, all the dates will be greater than or equal to January 1st of 2013. So as for the order quantity, we also asked our query to only return an order where the order quantity is greater than whichever value we assigned to the @quantity variable, which is 50. That's why we will see all the rows here and all the values for this column, order quantity, should be greater than 50. Now let me switch this to 20. And let me say return only orders that have a quantity less than 20 for the same exact date and for the same exact product ID. Let's execute this query. So we don't have any that are less than 20. What about 30? Yep, we have one order. One order that has an order quantity less than 30. Right here. So we have 20. What if we use 100? And of course we will have multiple values. So everything here, all the records should have an order quantity less than 100. Yep. And this is how we use the variables or SQL variables within a SQL statement or SQL script. And you may tell me, why should I use these variables? I can just put the values over here and call it a day and run my query. You are right if you say that, but there are some scenarios where you will have, for example, too many scripts, and let's say you want to use the same filters for all these scripts. As you can see, we have on query number 2 here, query number 3. How many queries I have first? 1, 2, 3, 4 queries. So if you are to write the values in here like this, you will have to repeat those numbers everywhere like that. In order for your queries to run. Let's just run these two for now. Now let's say you realize that you entered the wrong date. So in order to fix that, you have to fix that date on every single query that you have. But when you use the variables within your where clause, while you have several queries to run, you don't have to change the values on every single query like what I did. All you need to do, just go on the top and change the values here. And once you change it, it will go across every single query that's using those variables. So this is pretty much the major benefit of using the variables, as you can see. So I have all 4 query results. And all I did, I just changed the values, these three values here. Let's see. And just by changing those three values, the change will be applied to every single query that's using those variables down here. So what I can do now, I can just hit execute. So I don't have anything within this date range. What if I use that? No. Oh, I don't have a product ID number 4, maybe. Okay, let's go back to 3. Yeah. So there is a product ID number 3 in the database. Alrighty. So yeah, that's the benefit actually of using the variables in SQL. And this is the syntax actually how it's been used. You declare the variable, you assign a data type to it, you set or assign a value to that variable, then you use your variable within your query, either in a where clause, or you can even return it as part of the results of your query. We alias it as quantity, product ID as prod ID. So let's run it just on the first query, since I have like multiple queries, just so I can show you that you can also return the values of your variables within your select statement and not just limiting it to the filters within your where clause. Okay, I hope this helped, and if you like this video again, make sure to hit the like button and leave your comments in the below section. And thank you for watching.